I'm Vernon, 34 years old, and a software engineer who finally stopped living in my brother's shadow. All my life, my birthdays were forgotten, while my parents threw lavish celebrations for my brother Maxwell. This year, instead of complaining, I made a power move by purchasing the luxury penthouse my parents had been dreaming about for years. When I casually showed them the photos, their reaction was nothing short of explosive. If you're watching this from a family where you've felt overlooked, hit like and subscribe, because this story might just give you the courage to finally stand up for yourself. Growing up in Brookline, an upper-middle-class suburb of Boston, my childhood home looked perfect from the outside. The colonial-style house with its manicured lawn and 4 bedrooms projected success and stability to everyone who passed by. But inside those walls, a clear hierarchy existed that shaped my entire life. My family consisted of 4 people. My father, Robert, a stern and ambitious man with salt and pepper hair, who always wore tailored suits. My mother, Eleanor, a poised woman with a perpetual social calendar, who served on several charity boards. My older brother, Maxwell, 3 years my senior, and myself, the afterthought. My parents built their fortune in real estate development. They started small with a single apartment building renovation, and gradually expanded to larger commercial properties across Boston. Their success story was legendary within our extended family, and they carried themselves with the confidence of self-made millionaires. This background meant they had astronomical expectations for their children, particularly for Maxwell, who they groomed from birth to take over the family business. Maxwell seemed born to please them. By age 5, he was already showing athletic prowess in Little League Baseball. By 8, he was earning straight A's and winning math competitions. My parents beamed with pride at every award ceremony, every game, every school event. They documented his achievements meticulously in leather-bound photo albums that occupied a special shelf in our living room. Meanwhile, I developed different interests. Computers fascinated me from the moment my elementary school got its first shared computer lab. While Maxwell practiced sports in the backyard with Dad, I was taking apart old electronics and learning early programming languages. My parents viewed this as a quirky phase at best, a waste of time at worst. Computers are for people who can't succeed in the real world. My father once told me when I showed him a simple game I'd coded at age 11, Maxwell is developing real-world skills that build character. The pattern of favoritism was never clearer than on our birthdays. My first vivid memory of this disparity came on my 6th birthday. I received a small toy truck and a store-bought cake that still had the price sticker on the box. That same day, despite it not being any special occasion for Maxwell, my parents surprised him with an expensive mountain bike because he'd been doing so well in school. I remember standing in the driveway clutching my truck while everyone admired Maxwell riding circles around me on his new bike. As years passed, the pattern became tradition. Maxwell's birthdays warranted elaborate celebrations at Boston's finest restaurants. The entire extended family would be invited, presents would pile high, and my parents would make emotional speeches about their pride in their firstborn son. One year, they rented out an entire bowling alley for his friends. Another year, they surprised him with a sailboat for his 16th birthday. My birthdays, by contrast, were often forgotten in the chaos of my parents' busy schedules. "Oh, is that today?" became a phrase I dreaded hearing each year. Sometimes they'd hastily pick up a gift card or order a pizza as an afterthought. Many years, the only acknowledgement came from our housekeeper Maria, who would slip me a cupcake with a candle and a gentle squeeze of my shoulder. The most painful memory came on my 10th birthday. I'd finally worked up the courage to ask for a small party at the local arcade with 5 friends from school. Surprisingly, my parents agreed, and for once, I felt special as I handed out invitations. 2 days before the party, Maxwell's soccer team unexpectedly made it to a regional tournament. Without even consulting me, my parents canceled my party to drive Maxwell 3 hours to his game. "Your friends will understand," my mother said, patting my head as they packed the car. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your brother." I spent my 10th birthday alone at our neighbor's house watching television and pretending I didn't care. That night, I made a silent promise to myself that someday I would matter too. As these experiences accumulated, I developed coping mechanisms. I retreated further into the world of technology, finding community in early internet forums where no one knew I was Maxwell's little brother. I taught myself programming languages from library books. I built my first computer from salvaged parts when I was 13. In this digital realm, I found validation that was entirely based on my skills rather than my family position. High school continued the established pattern. Maxwell was valedictorian captain of the debate team and prom king. He dated the most popular girl in school and got recruited by Ivy League colleges. My parents attended every debate, every award ceremony, beaming with pride and taking endless photos for those special albums. I was no slouch, academically maintaining a solid GPA while excelling in computer science and mathematics. I won the state science fair with a software project that predicted traffic patterns, but my parents couldn't attend because it conflicted with one of Maxwell's debate tournaments. When I brought home the first place trophy, my father glanced at it and said, "Good job. Did you know Maxwell just got accepted to Harvard early decision?" The resentment grew inside me year after year, but rather than becoming destructive, it crystallized into determination. If I couldn't earn their recognition, I would succeed so dramatically, they would have no choice but to acknowledge me. I stopped seeking their approval and started planning my escape from their shadow. When college acceptance letters arrived during my senior year, I received the news I'd been working toward MIT had accepted me into their computer science program. I rushed home that day, letter in hand, heart pounding with excitement. This was it, proof that my passion and hard work were taking me somewhere significant. "Mom, Dad, I got into MIT." I announced, bursting into the kitchen where they sat reviewing property documents. My father glanced up briefly. "That's nice, Vernon. Did you get any scholarships? Those tuition bills will be steep." My mother added, "We should look at some state schools as backup options. MIT is expensive, and with Maxwell at Harvard Business School next year." And there it was. Maxwell had been accepted to Harvard 3 months earlier, and my parents had thrown a massive party inviting family, friends, business associates, and our extended family. They'd ordered a custom cake shaped like the Harvard shield and presented Maxwell with a new laptop and a credit card for expenses. For my MIT acceptance, arguably just as prestigious in the tech world, I received cautionary financial advice. The contrast continued as we prepared for college. My parents purchased Maxwell a condominium near Harvard Square so he wouldn't waste money on rent. They fully funded his tuition, provided him with a monthly allowance for expenses, and bought him a new car to navigate Boston. For me, they co-signed my student loans, but made it clear I would be responsible for repayment. I lived in the standard freshman dormitory and worked 3 part-time jobs: computer lab assistant during weekdays, retail at an electronics store on weekends, and freelance web development whenever I could squeeze in extra hours. Between work and classes, I averaged about 5 hours of sleep per night that first year. Despite these challenges, MIT opened a world of possibilities. I discovered that I wasn't just good at coding. I had an intuitive understanding of software architecture that impressed even my professors. The university's collaborative environment connected me with brilliant peers who pushed my thinking and expanded my skills. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language and valued my talents. During sophomore year, I joined a research project developing machine learning algorithms for predictive analytics. The professor leading the project, Dr. Andrea Lawrence, became the first mentor who truly saw my potential. She pushed me to publish my findings in academic journals and connected me with her industry contacts. "Vernon, you have a rare combination of theoretical understanding and practical application skills," she told me after I debugged a particularly complex algorithm. "Don't waste that talent." Through Dr. Lawrence's network, I landed a summer internship at TechFusion, a rapidly growing software company in San Francisco. That summer changed everything. I worked directly with senior developers, contributed to actual product features, and impressed the management team so thoroughly that they offered me a part-time remote position I could maintain during school and a guaranteed full-time role after graduation. When I called home to share this news, my mother answered, "Mom, guess what? TechFusion offered me a job after I graduate, and they want me to work remotely during my senior year." "That's nice, honey," she replied, distraction evident in her voice. "Listen, can I call you back? We're preparing for Maxwell's graduation dinner. He's finishing his MBA a semester early, and we've reserved the private room at Harvest. Did you know the dean is coming?" I hung up unsurprised, yet still stung. Maxwell's accomplishments, even the minor ones, warranted celebration. Mine were afterthoughts, barely registering in my parents' consciousness. After graduation, I moved to San Francisco to start my full-time position at Tech Fusion. The physical distance from Boston provided emotional relief I hadn't anticipated. 3,000 miles between us meant fewer direct comparisons, fewer last-minute family events I couldn't attend, and fewer opportunities to feel invisible. My early years in the tech industry were a blur of long hours, constant learning, and gradually increasing responsibility. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with 3 roommates, saving every possible dollar. While my peers splurged on San Francisco's restaurants and nightlife, I invested in additional tech certifications, attended industry conferences on my own dime, and built side projects that expanded my portfolio. On my 25th birthday, feeling nostalgic and perhaps slightly masochistic, I called home hoping for birthday wishes. My father answered, sounding hurried. "Vernon, can I call you back tomorrow? We're just heading out the door." Maxwell closed his first major development deal, and we're taking him to celebrate at L'Espalier. Your mother reserved the chef's table. I waited for him to realize what day it was. He didn't. Sure, Dad. Have a good night. That was the moment I decided to stop expecting recognition from my family. Their pattern was too deeply entrenched to change. Instead, I would focus entirely on building my own life and success by my own metrics. I blocked off the part of my heart that still yearned for their approval and channeled that energy into my career. The strategy paid off. I quickly rose through the ranks at Tech Fusion, earning promotions from junior developer to team lead within 3 years. I built a reputation for solving problems others considered impossible, and for translating complex technical concepts into accessible language for non-technical stakeholders. As my professional reputation grew, so did my financial stability. I moved to a better apartment, started maxing out my 401 Kelvin, and began making strategic investments. I put money into promising tech startups through my professional network and purchased my first rental property in an up-and-coming San Francisco neighborhood. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my family, obligatory holiday calls, and occasional emails. I no longer tried to impress them with my achievements. I no longer needed to. By my late 20s, I had established myself as a rising star in Silicon Valley. The pivotal moment came when I developed an innovative security protocol that addressed a critical vulnerability affecting cloud computing systems. My solution was elegant and effective, catching the attention of industry leaders and technology publications. TechCurrent magazine featured my work in their Innovators Under 30 issue, and I was invited to present at 3 major technology conferences. My professional network expanded exponentially, and job offers from competitors began arriving regularly. Tech Fusion, recognizing my value, promoted me to senior security architect with a substantial salary increase, significant stock options, and the freedom to assemble my own development team. While these professional victories accumulated, the pattern with my family remained unchanged. I sent my parents a copy of the magazine featuring my work, thinking surely this external validation would register. 2 weeks later, my mother called not to mention the article, but to complain that Maxwell was working too hard at the family business and wasn't taking proper vacations. When I was 30, Tech Fusion was acquired by Global Tech, one of the largest technology companies in the world. As a senior team member with substantial stock options, the acquisition made me financially independent overnight. My shares were worth over $7 million, vesting over 3 years. I could have retired immediately, but I loved my work and negotiated a leadership position in the merged company instead. I purchased a modern home in the hills overlooking San Francisco Bay, invested heavily in diversified portfolios, and established a foundation to fund technology education for underprivileged students. From the outside, my life appeared charmed. Yet success hadn't filled the emotional void my family created. During those years, Maxwell took over the family real estate business as planned. From occasional family calls and holiday visits, I gathered that his leadership wasn't bringing the golden touch my parents had expected. The company failed to adapt to changing market conditions, and Maxwell made several costly investment mistakes, including an ill-advised expansion into luxury hotel properties just before a market downturn. Rather than allowing Maxwell to face the consequences of these business decisions, my parents repeatedly bailed him out. They came out of semi-retirement to handle damage control, liquidated some of their personal investment accounts, and even took a mortgage on their paid-off home to inject capital into the struggling company. "Your brother is taking big risks," my father explained during a rare phone conversation, where he actually discussed family business with me. "That's how you create true wealth. Playing it safe, like you do with your tech job, might be stable, but it won't build a legacy." I muted my reaction to his dismissal of my seven-figure net worth, as playing it safe, and changed the subject. My 32nd birthday passed without acknowledgement from my family. That same week, I learned through a cousin that my parents had been trying for years to purchase a specific luxury penthouse in the Beacon, one of Boston's most prestigious residential buildings. The property held special significance for them. The Beacon was the first major building they had successfully developed in their early career, selling it to a larger real estate group that converted it to luxury condominiums. Owning the penthouse would represent coming full circle in their careers. However, their financial resources were increasingly tied up in rescuing Maxwell's business missteps. Each time the penthouse came on the market, they couldn't liquidate assets quickly enough to make a competitive offer. My cousin mentioned they'd missed out for the third time recently and were devastated. On my 33rd birthday, I sat alone on my deck, overlooking San Francisco Bay, reflecting on this information, while watching a particularly stunning sunset. My phone remained silent, no calls or messages from family. That same day, I closed a deal on a patent for a security algorithm I'd developed independently, selling it to a major technology firm for 8 figures. The contrast was almost poetic. As I signed the final documents for the biggest personal achievement of my career, my family was likely gathered around a table somewhere in Boston, discussing Maxwell's newest venture, without a thought of what day it might be for me. Something shifted inside me that evening. I was done waiting for recognition that would never come. It was time to write my own story, one where I defined my worth, instead of waiting for others to see it. As I approached my 34th birthday, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of enduring another forgotten celebration, I would give myself a gift that acknowledged my success and, incidentally, made a statement I'd been wanting to make for decades. I contacted a high-end real estate agent in Boston and inquired about the Beacon's penthouse. Fortune smiled on me. The current owners had just quietly listed it for sale, preferring a private transaction over a public listing due to their celebrity status. The agent was surprised by my immediate interest without even seeing the property. Most buyers want at least a virtual tour before expressing serious interest. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice reflecting professional skepticism. "I'm familiar with the building," I replied, "but I'll fly out this weekend to see it in person before making an offer." That Friday, I boarded a red-eye flight from San Francisco to Boston, arriving early Saturday morning. The real estate agent Judith Blackwell met me at the Beacon, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. As the private elevator ascended to the top floor, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: vindication, excitement, and an undercurrent of sadness that my life had led to this particular moment. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, and my first impression was of light, extraordinary, abundant light, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased panoramic views of Boston Harbor, the Charles River, and the city skyline. The space was everything my parents had described in their rare moments of vulnerability: 4,000 square feet of perfectly designed luxury, with soaring ceilings, custom millwork, and architectural details that paid homage to Boston's historic character while embracing modern aesthetics. The current owners renovated extensively 5 years ago, Judith explained, as we moved through the expansive living areas. They brought in an architectural team from New York to preserve the original character while updating all systems and finishes. I walked slowly through each room, absorbing details: herringbone, hardwood floors, a chef's kitchen with professional-grade appliances, a primary suite with harbor views from the bed, and a bathroom larger than my first apartment. A wood-paneled library featured built-in bookcases that stretched to the 12-foot ceilings. The dining room could easily seat 20 for formal dinners. On the wraparound terrace, I stood silently, taking in the view my parents had coveted for so long. From this vantage point, I could see the building where I grew up, the harbor, where Maxwell learned to sail on his 16th birthday boat, and the financial district where my parents' company maintained offices. "What's the asking price?" I asked, already knowing I would pay it. $11.8 million. Judith replied, watching my reaction carefully. "The owners are firm on the price given the recent renovations and the property's uniqueness." I nodded. "I'll take it. All cash, no contingencies, and I can close as quickly as they'd like. I'd prefer to handle this quietly." Judith's professional composure slipped momentarily, revealing genuine surprise. "All cash. That's the most efficient way to proceed," I finished for her. "Please draft the offer immediately. I'll wire a deposit this afternoon." Within hours, my offer was accepted. The sellers, eager for a quick, clean transaction, agreed to close in 3 weeks. I flew back to San Francisco that evening and began arranging the wire transfer for the full purchase amount through my investment manager, who raised an eyebrow but asked no questions about my sudden interest in Boston real estate. The transaction proceeded smoothly. I handled everything remotely, signing documents via courier and attending the closing via video conference. On April 15th, exactly 1 month before my 34th birthday, I became the owner of the penthouse at the Beacon. Once the property was mine, I hired Catherine Winters, one of San Francisco's most sought-after interior designers, who had recently opened a Boston office. I flew her to the penthouse for an initial consultation. "The space is magnificent," she said, as we walked through the empty rooms. "What direction would you like to take with the design?" I considered the question carefully. I want it modern but warm. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, but unquestionably high quality. I want anyone who enters to feel both impressed and comfortable. Catherine nodded, taking notes. "And how often will you be using the property that affects some of our material choices and layout decisions?" "Infrequently, at least initially," I admitted. "I'll maintain my primary residence in California. This is partly an investment and partly—" I paused, unsure how to explain the complicated emotions behind the purchase. "A personal milestone," she suggested. Exactly. Over the next few months, Catherine transformed the penthouse. She selected furniture that balanced comfort with sophistication, a sectional sofa in buttersoft leather for the living room, Italian marble tables, custom bookshelves, and handcrafted bedroom furniture from a renowned New England woodworker. The kitchen received new state-of-the-art appliances, and the bathrooms were updated with smart technology and heated floors. Catherine suggested subtle nods to both Boston's history and technological innovation throughout the design. Vintage maps of Boston Harbor, framed in sleek metal, locally blown glass light fixtures, controlled by custom home automation, and an antique telescope mounted on the terrace next to a weather monitoring system that displayed data on hidden screens. The project cost nearly $2 million beyond the purchase price, but the result was spectacular, a perfect blend of historic Boston character and Silicon Valley innovation. When Catherine sent the final photographs, I felt a complex satisfaction looking at my new property. The penthouse represented not just a significant financial investment, but an emotional one. I had purchased something my parents had wanted for years, but couldn't have a tangible symbol of my success achieved entirely without their support or recognition. Throughout the purchase and renovation process, I experienced conflicting emotions. Part of me felt childish, as if I were buying an expensive toy just to prove I could. Another part recognized this as a sound financial investment in a prime real estate market. But mostly I acknowledged this was about something deeper, finally taking control of a narrative that had defined me as secondary for my entire life. Was it petty, perhaps? Was it healing? Definitely. The penthouse represented a final release from waiting for parental validation that would never come. I had reached a point where I could give myself the recognition they had withheld. As my 34th birthday approached, I received the standard silence from my family. No calls, no cards, not even a text message. That evening, Catherine sent the final set of professional photographs of the completed penthouse. I sat on my deck in San Francisco, scrolling through images of my Boston property, feeling a strange sense of peace. The next day, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Vernon, we're having the annual Thanksgiving dinner next month, and we expect you to attend. Maxwell has some exciting news to share with the family." No mention of my birthday the previous day, no questions about my life or work, Just an instruction to appear for another celebration of Maxwell. I'll be there, I said, making a decision in that moment. The penthouse would remain my secret for now. Thanksgiving would be the perfect time for its revelation. The annual family Thanksgiving dinner had followed the same format for 20 years. Turkey with traditional sides served precisely at 4 in the afternoon, followed by pumpkin pie and family discussions that inevitably centered around Maxwell's latest achievements. This year would be different, though. No one but me knew it yet. I arrived at my parents' Brookline home at 3:30, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and a small overnight bag. My mother answered the door wearing an apron over her designer dress, her hair perfectly styled despite the cooking activities. "Vernon, you're early," she said, accepting my obligatory cheek kiss. "Your brother hasn't arrived yet." "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied, following her into the kitchen. My father sat at the breakfast bar reading financial news on his tablet. He glanced up briefly. "Vernon, good flight." He returned to his reading, without waiting for my answer. The scene was so familiar it almost made me laugh. Some things never changed, regardless of how much else in life did. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, observing my parents in their natural habitat. They moved around each other with the choreographed efficiency of a long-married couple, occasionally exchanging comments about the meal preparation or the latest neighborhood gossip. Neither asked about my work, my home, or my life in California. I had become accustomed to this particular invisibility, present physically, but absent from their genuine interest. The doorbell rang at 4 precisely, and the energy in the house immediately shifted. My parents straightened, their faces brightening, as my father hurried to answer the door. Maxwell had arrived. "There he is," my father boomed from the hallway. The man of the hour. Maxwell entered the kitchen like a returning conqueror, his arm around our father's shoulders. At 37, he had maintained the athletic build of his youth, though his hairline had receded slightly. He wore an expensive suit, despite the family setting his custom cufflinks catching the light as he embraced our mother. "Hi, little brother," he said, finally noticing me in the corner, still out in California playing with computers. Before I could respond, my mother interrupted. "Let's move to the dining room. Everything's ready, and Maxwell has exciting news that can't wait until after dinner." We settled around the formal dining table set with my grandmother's china and sterling silver. My father carved the turkey with ceremonial precision, while my mother beamed at Maxwell, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Should we tell them now or after dinner?" Maxwell asked, playing to his audience. Now, my mother urged. "I can't wait another minute." Maxwell straightened in his chair, assuming the posture of someone about to make a significant announcement. "Anderson Real Estate is expanding to New York. We've secured financing for a major development in Manhattan luxury condominiums in the Upper East Side." My parents erupted in congratulatory exclamations. My father slapped the table in excitement, nearly toppling his wine glass. "That's our boy. Always thinking bigger." New York City, the ultimate real estate market. My mother wiped away an actual tear. "We're so proud of you, darling. This is everything we worked for all these years." As they celebrated, Maxwell added casually, "Mom and Dad are investing their retirement accounts as anchor investors. Their experience will be invaluable as we navigate the New York market." I nearly choked on my water. They were investing their retirement funds in Maxwell's venture after his previous business missteps. The financial recklessness was staggering, but I kept my expression neutral as the celebration continued around me. Eventually, after exhausting the topic of Maxwell's brilliance, my mother turned to me with the obligatory inquiry about my life, the conversational equivalent of a participation trophy. "And what about you, Vernon? Still at that same company?" I nodded. "Still at Global Tech, yes. Leading the security division now." "That's nice, dear," she replied, already turning back to Maxwell. "Now tell us more about the amenities you're planning for the building." The dinner proceeded predictably. Maxwell dominated the conversation, detailing his vision for the New York property, while my parents listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that allowed him to further showcase his supposed business acumen. I ate silently, conserving energy for what would come later. As my mother served coffee and pie in the living room, my father switched topics unexpectedly. "You know what property just went off the market again?" he said, his voice tinged with genuine regret. The penthouse at the Beacon. Third time we've missed it. My mother sighed dramatically. That penthouse would have been perfect for entertaining our New York investors. Remember when we developed that building, Robert, our first major success? I still have the original architectural plans in my office, my father said. Finest building we ever worked on. Whoever bought that penthouse got a piece of Boston history. Maxwell jumped in. Once the New York project succeeds, we'll have the capital to buy it next time it's listed. We'll make it the Boston headquarters for Anderson Real Estate's expansion. My parents nodded appreciatively at this vision, completely unaware of the irony unfolding in their living room. The moment had arrived more perfectly than I could have orchestrated. Speaking of real estate, I said, casually pulling out my phone, I recently made an investment I'd like your opinion on. This was a calculated move. My parents never refused an opportunity to give their expert opinion on property investments, even mine. My father leaned forward slightly, professional interest momentarily, overriding his indifference to my affairs. What kind of property, he asked. A condominium in Boston, actually. Let me show you some photos. I opened the professional photography portfolio on my phone and handed it to my father. My mother moved closer to see the screen, while Maxwell continued eating his pie, uninterested in my investment. My father's expression changed gradually as he scrolled through the images, recognition dawning slowly. The distinctive crown molding the unique archways, the unmistakable harbor view from the terrace. This is... He began, his voice suddenly hoarse. My mother gasped, grabbing the phone from him. This is the penthouse at the Beacon, Vernon. These are professional listing photos. Where did you get these? From my interior designer, I replied calmly, taking a sip of coffee. She sent them after completing the renovation last month. The room fell completely silent. Maxwell stopped mid-bite, finally paying attention. Your interior designer, my father repeated slowly. Yes, I purchased the penthouse in April. The renovation was just completed a few weeks ago. My mother's face flushed deep red. That's not possible. The penthouse at the Beacon sold for nearly $12 million. 11.8, actually, I corrected gently, plus about $2 million in renovations. It's a remarkable property. The original architectural details were beautifully preserved. Maxwell dropped his fork with a clatter. You're lying. There's no way you could afford a property like that. I met his gaze steadily. I purchased it outright. No mortgage. My father stood abruptly, his face contorted with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify: anger, disbelief, perhaps even fear. This is absurd. You're a computer programmer. You can't just buy a $12 million penthouse. Software security architect, I corrected. And yes, I can. I did. My mother grabbed the phone again, scrolling frantically through the photos as if searching for evidence of deception. These are just the listing photos. You're making this up for attention. I reached into my overnight bag and pulled out a folder containing the deed, property tax statement, and renovation contracts, all bearing my name. I placed them on the coffee table without comment. My father snatched up the documents, reviewing them with the experienced eye of a real estate developer. His hands began to tremble slightly. You purchased the Beacon penthouse, he stated flatly, dropping the papers. Our penthouse. Your penthouse, I repeated. I wasn't aware you owned it. You know exactly what he means, my mother snapped, her voice rising. We've been trying to buy that property for years. It was our dream. How interesting that you never mentioned this dream to me, I said. I learned about your interest in the property from cousin Sarah, not from either of you. Maxwell had recovered from his initial shock and shifted to attack mode. This is just like you, Vernon. Always trying to overshadow family events with your showing off. I announce a major business expansion, and you can't stand not being the center of attention for once. I turned to him, maintaining my calm. That's an interesting perspective coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded. It means that for 34 years, every family event has centered around you. Every holiday, every gathering, every conversation eventually turns to Maxwell's latest achievement. Even my birthdays somehow became celebrations of you. That's ridiculous, my mother interjected. We've always treated you both equally. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of her statement. When was my birthday, Mom? The day before yesterday. Did either of you call? Send a text. Remember it all. Their silence was answer enough. But you called me yesterday to make sure I would be here for Maxwell's announcement. You've never missed one of his birthdays. You've thrown him parties that cost more than most people's weddings, but mine consistently forgotten or minimized. So, this is what my father demanded, gesturing at the property documents. Some kind of childish revenge because you think we didn't give you enough birthday parties. This is an investment property, I replied evenly. One that happened to have special significance. But the fact that your immediate reaction is anger, rather than perhaps curiosity about how your son could afford such a purchase, says everything about our relationship. You deliberately bought that penthouse to spite us, my mother accused, her voice cracking with emotion. You knew we wanted it, and you took it away from us. How could I have known how much it meant to you, I countered. You've never shared anything meaningful about your lives with me. I've always been an afterthought in this family, the audience member watching the Maxwell show. Maxwell stood now, pointing his finger at me. You've always been jealous of my success. This is just another pathetic attempt to compete with me. Throwing money around doesn't make you successful, Vernon. It makes you desperate for attention. I remained seated, my voice level. I'm not competing with you, Maxwell. I stopped doing that years ago, when I realized it wasn't a fair competition, not because you were better, but because the judges were biased from the start. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You ungrateful, he sputtered. Everything we did was to secure your future. The business was always meant for both of you, but you chose to run off to California instead of joining the family legacy. Was it? I asked quietly. Was I ever actually invited to be part of that legacy? Or was I just expected to be Maxwell's support staff, handling whatever tasks he didn't want, while he took the leadership role? My mother began to cry loud theatrical sobs that had worked to manipulate family conflicts since my childhood. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By stealing our dream property and accusing us of favoritism. I stood, finally gathering the property documents from the table. I think I'll head to my hotel. Clearly this dinner is over. Hotel, my mother asked between sobs. You always stay in your old room. Not tonight, I replied. I think we all need some space. Wait. My father commanded, his businessman persona reasserting itself. The penthouse. Would you consider selling it to us? When the New York project is established, we could make you a fair offer. The audacity of the request after everything that had just transpired was so perfectly on brand that I almost admired it. No, I said simply. I won't be selling. Enjoy your evening. I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind the stunned silence of a family confronting a truth they had spent decades denying. I had barely reached my rental car when I heard the front door slam behind me. Heavy footsteps on the walkway told me someone had followed me out. I turned to find my father approaching, his face still flushed with anger. You don't just walk out in the middle of a family discussion, he said, his tone, the same one he'd used when I was a child being reprimanded. That wasn't a discussion, I replied. It was an ambush. Get back inside, he ordered. We're going to settle this like adults. Perhaps it was the commanding tone that had worked on me for decades. Or perhaps it was my own desire for resolution, but I found myself following him back into the house. In the living room, my mother had composed herself, though her makeup was smeared from tears. Maxwell stood by the fireplace, arms crossed defensively across his chest. Sit down, my father directed, pointing to the chair I had vacated minutes earlier. I remained standing. I'm not a child you can order around anymore. If you want to talk, we'll talk as equals. My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly and took his own seat. Fine. Let's address these ridiculous accusations of favoritism. They're not accusations, I said. They're observations based on a lifetime of consistent patterns. We have always supported both our sons. Equally, my mother insisted, her voice quavering with emotion. We're deeply hurt that you would suggest otherwise. Equally, I repeated. Maxwell's Harvard education was fully funded, including a condo and living expenses. I worked 3 jobs to help pay for MIT. You had scholarships, my father countered. Partial scholarships. I graduated with $60,000 in student loans that I paid off myself. You chose an expensive private university, my mother said. We suggested state schools that would have been more affordable. Yet you never suggested Maxwell attend a state school to save money, I pointed out. The different standards were always clear. Maxwell pushed away from the fireplace, stepping forward. This is absurd. You're painting yourself as some kind of victim when you've had every advantage in life. Private school education connections through our family name. Connections I never used, I interrupted. Everything I've built on my own merit. Can you say the same? Maxwell's face flushed. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You took over a successful, established family business. When you made mistakes, our parents bailed you out repeatedly. Even now, they're investing their retirement funds in your New York venture, despite your track record of questionable business decisions. That's enough, my father thundered. Maxwell took risks that didn't always pay off, but that's the nature of real estate development. He has vision. And I don't, I asked. My work in security architecture is revolutionizing how companies protect data. I've been featured in major technology publications. I hold patents that are industry standards now. But none of that registers with you, because it's not real estate and it's not Maxwell. We've always been proud of your computer work, my mother said weakly. I pulled out my phone again and opened my photo gallery. Let me show you something. I pulled up an image I'd saved years ago, a childhood photo from Maxwell's 12th birthday. The dining room table was decorated elaborately with balloons and streamers. A pile of wrapped gifts towered at one end. Maxwell sat beaming in the center, our parents flanking him proudly. This was Maxwell's 12th birthday, I said, showing them the photo. 3 days later was my 9th birthday. Would anyone like to guess what we did to celebrate? Silence filled the room. Nothing, I continued. You had a business trip, Dad. Mom, you had a charity committee meeting. I ate a frozen dinner with the babysitter. I swiped to another photo, Maxwell's high school graduation. Our parents had rented a party tent in the backyard and invited 50 people. My high school graduation coincided with Maxwell's acceptance to Harvard Business School. The graduation party you threw became his celebration instead. No one even mentioned that I was valedictorian of my class. My mother's lower lip trembled. Vernon, that's not how it was. It's exactly how it was, I insisted. Every milestone in my life was overshadowed by something in Maxwell's. Every achievement dismissed or ignored because it didn't fit into your vision of success. My father leaned forward, his expression hardening. So you're punishing us by buying the penthouse. Is that it? Decades of perceived slights, and your response is to spend millions on property out of spite. I bought the penthouse because I wanted it, and I could afford it, I replied. The fact that you immediately assume my life choices revolve around you proves my point. You've never seen me as an independent person with my own goals and desires. I've always been defined in relation to Maxwell, the lesser son, the afterthought. Maxwell stormed toward the door. I don't have to listen to this pathetic pity party. Vernon's always been jealous of me, and now he's trying to rewrite history to make himself the victim. Running away from uncomfortable truths, Maxwell, I called after him. That's consistent with your pattern, too. He spun around, face contorted with rage. You know nothing about my life. You abandoned the family business to play with computers in California. You've barely been part of this family for years, and now you show up to throw around money and accusations. I didn't abandon anything, I said calmly. I was never included to begin with. The family business was always positioned as your birthright, not our shared legacy. That's not true, my father interjected. We always hoped both our sons would join Anderson Real Estate. Really, I challenged. When was that offer extended to me? When did you ever discuss my role in the company's future? You groomed Maxwell from childhood while dismissing my interests and aptitudes. Your interests weren't practical, my father insisted. Computer programming seemed like a hobby, not a career path. A hobby that's made me financially independent. At 34, I pointed out. A hobby that's allowed me to purchase the penthouse you coveted, but couldn't afford, because you've invested everything in bailing out Maxwell's business mistakes. Maxwell slammed his fist against the wall. You smug self-righteous. That's enough, my mother cried. Please stop fighting. We're family. Are we? I asked quietly. Because family sees each other. Family acknowledges achievements. Family remembers birthdays. A heavy silence fell over the room. Maxwell stood frozen by the door, seemingly torn between storming out and staying to defend himself. My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small. Perhaps we have focused more attention on Maxwell over the years. Catherine, my father, exclaimed, shocked by her admission. It's true, Robert, she continued, tears forming again. We've always celebrated Maxwell's achievements more visibly, but that doesn't mean we love Vernon any less. Actions speak louder than words, Mom, I said gently. For 34 years, your actions have shown exactly where your priorities lie. You've always been so self-sufficient, she said, as if this explained everything. Maxwell needed more guidance, more support. You seemed fine on your own. I wasn't fine, I corrected her. I adapted because I had no choice. I learned to seek validation elsewhere because it wasn't available at home. Maxwell made a disgusted sound and yanked open the front door. I don't need to stand here and be accused of being some kind of pampered favorite. Vernon, enjoy your empty penthouse and your victim complex. I'm building something real while you play with computers. The door slammed behind him with such force that the family photos on the wall rattled. One fell, the frame cracking as it hit the floor, a formal portrait of the four of us from years ago smiling as if nothing was wrong. My father stared at the fallen photo, but made no move to pick it up. Is that what you think, Vernon? That we don't value you? It's not what I think, I replied. It's what you've demonstrated consistently throughout my life. He seemed to age before my eyes, shoulders slumping slightly. We pushed Maxwell harder because he needed it. You were always naturally disciplined, focused. We never worried about you the way we worried about him. So I was punished for being self-sufficient, ignored, because I didn't create problems. Not punished, my mother interjected. We just directed our energy where we thought it was needed most. I considered their perspective, trying to see our family dynamic through their eyes. Perhaps in their minds they had been pragmatic parents, allocating resources where they perceived the greatest need. But the result was the same. One son had received abundant support, recognition, and celebration, while the other had been left to fend for himself emotionally. I'm not angry anymore, I said finally. I'm just disappointed. And sad that it took buying a $12 million property for you to finally have a real conversation with me about our family dynamic. My father straightened, businessman mode engaging again. Speaking of the property, Vernon, that penthouse would be perfect for entertaining the New York investors. Perhaps we could work out an arrangement to use it occasionally. We would pay a fair rental fee, of course. And there it was, even in this moment of supposed reconciliation, my father's priority was leveraging my achievement for Maxwell's benefit. Some patterns were too deeply ingrained to break. No, I said firmly. The penthouse is not available for family business use. But, no, Dad. That's my final answer. I picked up my overnight bag and moved toward the door. I think I've said everything I came to say. I'll be in Boston until Sunday, if either of you wants to continue this conversation. My mother rose quickly. Vernon, please don't leave like this. It's Thanksgiving. It's a little late for holiday sentimentality, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow. I walked out into the cold November evening, feeling oddly lighter than I had in years. The truth once spoken had its own peculiar freedom, regardless of whether it was accepted or denied by those who needed to hear it. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke in my hotel room to a barrage of text notifications from Maxwell. They ranged from angry accusations. You've always tried to undermine me, to backhanded compliments. Congrats on your little tech success, to transparent attempts at manipulation. Mom cried all night because of you. I read them all but responded to none, recognizing the familiar pattern of Maxwell's emotional tactics. Instead, I ordered room service breakfast and opened my laptop to check emails. Among the usual work correspondence was something unexpected. A message from my mother sent at 3:42 a.m. Vernon, I couldn't sleep thinking about our conversation. While I don't agree with everything you said, I recognize there may be some truth to your feelings of being overlooked. This isn't easy for me to admit. Your father and I never intended to make you feel less valued. Perhaps we took your strength and independence for granted. I'm sorry if we hurt you. Love, Mom. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the family dynamic I described, but it was more reflection than I'd ever received from her. The carefully worded your feelings of being overlooked, rather than our overlooking. You maintained her distance from responsibility, but the apology, however qualified, was unprecedented. I closed the laptop without responding, immediately needing time to process this small shift in our relationship. Later that day, I visited the penthouse, entering the space that had precipitated this family reckoning. In daylight, the views were even more spectacular than I remembered the Boston skyline, sharp and clear against the autumn sky. I walked through each room, running my hands along the custom woodwork, appreciating the design choices Catherine had made. This was my space purchased with my success, reflecting my aesthetic. Not my parents', not the family business legacy, but mine alone. The realization brought a sense of peace I hadn't anticipated. I spent the weekend in Boston, dividing my time between the penthouse and exploring the city where I'd grown up but never fully connected with. On Sunday morning, as I prepared to return to San Francisco, I received a text from my father, brief and characteristically practical. The property documents you showed appear in order. Impressive investment. We should discuss your financial planning when you have time. No apology, no acknowledgement of the emotional aspects of our confrontation, but a small recognition of my capability filtered through his lens of real estate and investment. For my father, this was significant progress. Back in San Francisco, I resumed my life with a strange new clarity. The constant background hum of seeking parental approval had quieted, replaced by acceptance that our relationship would always have limitations. This acceptance wasn't resignation, but liberation, freedom from expectations that had never served me. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with friends from MIT, who had known me during those years of working 3 jobs while studying. James Chen, now a professor of computer science, met me for dinner at a restaurant overlooking the bay. I always wondered how you managed it all, he said when I shared some of the family history. 3 jobs, full course load, and still graduating with honors. Necessity, I replied, and probably something to prove. Well, whatever drove you then has clearly worked out, he gestured toward the upscale restaurant around us, though I'm sorry it came with that family dynamic. It shaped me, I acknowledged, for better and worse. Mostly better from where I'm sitting, James said. You've built something remarkable, Vernon, not just professionally, but personally. Some people with your background become bitter or sabotage themselves. You channeled it into creation and growth. His perspective helped me see my journey through different eyes, not as the neglected son, but as someone who had built resilience and self-reliance through challenging circumstances. Dr. Andrea Lawrence, my mentor from MIT, who now consulted for major tech companies, provided another valuable perspective when we met for coffee. Family systems are complex ecosystems, she observed after I described the Thanksgiving confrontation. Your parents created a dynamic where Maxwell was positioned as the vulnerable one, requiring support while you were cast as naturally self-sufficient. Neither role served either of you well. Maxwell doesn't see it that way, I said. He wouldn't, she replied. His identity is built around being the chosen one, the successor. Acknowledging the imbalance threatens his self-concept. And my parents. Parents rarely admit to favoritism, even when it's obvious to everyone else. It contradicts their self-image as fair and loving. Your mother's email shows she's capable of some reflection, which is more than many would manage. These conversations help me contextualize my family experience within broader patterns of human behavior, making it less personal and more understandable, if not excusable. As May approached bringing my 35th birthday, I decided to do something unprecedented: celebrate properly. I invited a small group of close friends to my San Francisco home for dinner, prepared by a private chef, followed by an evening of conversation and connection. For the first time, I allowed myself to be celebrated without qualification or comparison. The morning of my birthday, a courier delivered a small package to my door. Inside was a vintage pocket watch with a note in my mother's handwriting. Vernon, this belonged to your grandfather. He was also a man who built his own path. I thought you should have it. Happy birthday. Love, Mom. The acknowledgement of my birthday, combined with the meaningful gift, represented a small crack in the family pattern. Not a complete transformation, but a beginning. My father's response came later that day, a text message that read, simply, "Happy birthday, son," 2 days late and minimalist, but still the first birthday acknowledgement I could remember receiving from him in years. Maxwell maintained radio silence, his wounded pride apparently preventing even token communication. As summer turned to fall, I made a significant decision about the Boston penthouse. Rather than letting it sit empty most of the year, I established a program that allowed promising technology students from underprivileged backgrounds to use it for short residencies while participating in Boston's innovation ecosystem. The property that had been a symbol of exclusion in my family story became a tool for inclusion in these students' journeys. When Thanksgiving approached again, I declined the family dinner invitation, choosing instead to host a Friendsgiving in San Francisco. The decision wasn't made from anger, but from self-care recognition that I could choose environments that nourished rather than diminished me. On Christmas, I sent thoughtful gifts to my parents, and Maxwell maintaining the connection without subjecting myself to the family dynamic in person. My mother called to thank me, our conversation, superficial but cordial. My father sent an email acknowledgement. Maxwell didn't respond at all. And so a new pattern established itself, one where I maintained family connections on my terms, with appropriate boundaries protecting the life I'd built. The emotional wound of decades of comparative neglect hadn't healed completely, but it had scabbed over, no longer raw and bleeding. In my professional life, I continued to thrive, eventually starting my own cybersecurity consulting firm that quickly attracted major clients. In my personal life, I built deeper friendships and began cautiously exploring romantic relationships that had previously taken a backseat to career ambitions. The penthouse in Boston remained mine, a tangible reminder that I could create my own recognition, my own celebration, my own success story. The property that had initially been purchased, partly out of spite, had transformed into something more meaningful, a symbol of self-determination and generosity. As I approach my 36th birthday, I understand now that the story of my family will always be complex, with no neat resolution or perfect reconciliation. Some patterns are too deeply entrenched to fully transform. But I've learned that writing my own story doesn't require their approval or even their understanding. It requires only my authenticity and my willingness to value myself when others don't. For anyone watching who has felt invisible in their family, who has lived in someone else's shadow, or who has achieved success that goes unrecognized by those whose recognition they most desire, I offer this: your worth isn't determined by others' capacity to see it. The validation you seek externally can be generated internally. And sometimes the family that truly appreciates you is the one you build yourself connection by connection, rather than the one you were born into. Have you ever had to create your own celebration when others forgot what mattered to you? Or found a way to recognize your own achievements when those closest to you couldn't see them? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their value exists independently of others' recognition. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that writing your own story is the most powerful choice you can make.